So we're going to be continuing with our notes, but it's always really helpful before you go on taking new notes to stop and look at where you were before. So if you look back on page 8, we're currently taking notes about macromolecules. These really large molecules that are made of small units called monomers. And we put those monomers together to form these really big molecules. So those big molecules are also called polymers. Poly meaning many, made of repeating units, monomers. So let's look, before we go on to talk about DNA and proteins, let's look at where we took notes before. We took notes before about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but so are lipids. Carbohydrates are arranged into a monomer, a repeating unit. And this repeating unit of carbs is called a monosaccharide. So we really want to make sure that we're practicing the name of the monomer and the name of the polymer or the large macromolecule. Now when we learned about carbs, we learned there are small carbs used for quick energy and large carbs used for longer energy, as well as using some carbs for structure, and plants do that. We have bones for our structure. So we talked about carbs and how to find and identify a carb with an indicator. We'll be doing that lab. We talked about lipids. Lipids are also made of CHO, but they're arranged into something called a triglyceride. Lipids are important for energy, but they're also important to build the structure of the cell membrane. Now, as we move on and we talk about DNA, nucleic acids, and proteins, they're going to be very different. They have very different structures and very different functions. So now we're starting new notes, and we're at the bottom of page 9. Nucleic acids. This is your DNA. What is DNA made of? Well, DNA is made of 5 elements. Carbon, life is carbon-based, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus. So no sulfur here. We're almost at the 6th essential. But we have these 5, and they're arranged into a 3-part. A 3-part. That's what it says right here. A 3-part monomer called a nucleotide. And so you have this very same picture in your notes, and I would like for you to make sure that you highlight it just like I'm going to. Put another box around this box. And notice that in this nucleotide are 3 parts. There is a sugar, a phosphate, and a nitrogen base. And so we're going to learn a lot more about the 3 parts of a nucleotide when we get to Unit 3. We learn all about how your DNA works. For now, we're trying to understand that if you take small parts, we can repeat them to build something larger. So nucleic acids are going to come in 2 forms. The first form is called deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. And so what you can actually think of is that D could stand for double. It doesn't. It stands for deoxyribonucleic. But you need to know that DNA is a double strand of nucleotides and that it carries the code. You've talked about this in your other science classes, I'm sure, that the code of DNA is what makes your cells yours. I have DNA and you have DNA. But the sequence of my DNA, do you know the nucleotides in DNA? There are actually 4, A, T, G, and C. And so adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine, if you look here, those are the different nucleotides. So this is a little different. In carbs, there was really just one type, the monosaccharide. That was the small part. We repeated it over and over again. Here we're seeing that these monomers, these small parts that I'm going to use over and over, actually come in 4 different versions. And that's how your DNA can be different from my DNA. and a frog has DNA, and a bacteria has DNA, and a mushroom, anything living has DNA. Everything living also has something called RNA. RNA is a single strand that performs different jobs to actually make the proteins. And so we're going to talk about proteins next. The key here is that if we look, Chanel, it's an organic molecule. Organic. And if you notice, the nucleotide is called, the monomer is called a nucleic acid. Notice this actually can help us when we're trying to memorize this, that these ends go together, nucleotide and nucleic acid. That can help you remember. So because you've heard of DNA before, we're going to go on and talk about proteins. Proteins are SNOPs, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. So we need all 6 essential elements. And we're going to arrange them into something called an amino acid. Now that amino acid, just in case you're curious, has a carbon here, and a carbon here, and a nitrogen. And you don't even have to draw this or know this, but I wanted you to see what an amino acid looks like. An amino acid has all of these things, and sometimes it has sulfur here, and sometimes it has other things. But we can then put those amino acids together, they'll start to fold. And so this is really important, that if they're going to fold into the right shape, then they need to be in the right order. So next to this word form, if you'll also add the word fold. What we're going to see this year is that proteins have 6 very important jobs in our cells. And these jobs are different depending on the type of protein. So for example, your hair and nails are made of protein. Where's that protein coming from? A cell, a hair follicle, and the nail bed are actually making those proteins. They're there just for structure. They're called keratin. Versus your muscle, which does a very different job, is actually called myosin. So we have thousands of different proteins in our body. And they do these 6 jobs. They help create structure, like hair and nails. They help us communicate, like the hormone insulin. They provide immune protection, like antibodies, not antibiotics that kill bacteria. Antibodies are proteins inside of your body. They absorb and reflect light, like melanin. Your skin color is because there's a protein absorbing light or reflecting light. Chlorophyll is in plants. That's how plants can absorb sunlight to actually make their own food. Proteins are also important for transport, like hemoglobin, the protein that transports oxygen in our blood. And we're going to talk a lot about how proteins can be enzymes. They can break things down, or some will also build. So we're going to talk about enzymes a lot more. I want you to notice these 6 functions. They have 6 important jobs. But what I want you to notice is that none of these jobs are the job of energy. Proteins are not used by the body for energy. When you eat protein like a piece of chicken or peanut butter or drink a protein shake, what your body does is it does break them down. You don't have a piece of chicken floating around in your body. Your body breaks it down, but it rebuilds it into all of these things that your body needs. If your body used protein for energy, it wouldn't be able to build these things. So it's really important to go back in your notes and remember that 2 things are used for energy. And it's not proteins. Proteins are not used for energy. And of course, neither is our DNA. Nucleic acids are way too important to be broken down for energy. You do need to memorize these 6 important jobs: structure, like hair and nails; communication, like a hormone insulin that tells your body how much sugar is in your blood; immune protection, absorbing light; transport, and enzymes. And these are the 6 jobs of a protein. The other thing, of course, that you need to know is the name of the monomer, an amino acid. And so we're going to practice in class a memory tool to help us remember the monomers. But for now, what I'd like for you to do is notice that we're getting really close to a summary box. This is the indicator by Arendt. It will indicate if protein is present by turning from purple to blue. So notice we have 4 indicators. 2 for carbs, 1 for lipids, and 1 for protein, and they all change color. And so, as we are finishing up here, we've learned about 4 macromolecules. Now notice, those macromolecules were all organic. They all had at least C, H, and O. Some of them had more. But these 4 organic macromolecules are found in every living thing. Cells both build these molecules and break them down to maintain something called homeostasis. And homeostasis is a regulated internal conditions. Kind of like, it's exactly like keeping your body at the same temperature. It's exactly like making sure you have a little bit of sugar in your body and not too much or too little. And so your cells will build things and break them down depending on their own needs, what they need for survival at that time. Here we are at the summary box. Now you should have already done a summary box for carbs and lipids. So this summary box needs to be specifically about proteins and nucleic acids. Please use at least 2 vocabulary words and refer to a picture, a diagram from your notes. So if you look back, you're going to see lots of different diagrams in your notes. You've got 1.1 G, H, and I that you can refer to. And this is where we're stopping.